caused such a shift in the LGBT community as well. It was that people started coming out more, and suddenly it was no longer just like a social experiment or something that you just thought of as a stereotype. All of a sudden it was people's neighbors, it was their brothers, their uncles, their sisters, and on down the line. And when it became personal, that's when the attitude started changing. So maybe as more of us are coming out, I'm hoping that maybe we'll start to see kind of that same landslide shift, because after that started happening with the LGBT movement, I mean, it was just like a cannonball. All of a sudden there was, there's more widespread acceptance. We've got marriage equality now. And that groundswell just started from people saying, well, hey, I'm gay, or I'm bi, or I'm trans, or whatever. And it became personal. So maybe that's kind of one of the things that the atheist movement, or I hate to call it a movement because it's more like movements, but maybe that's something that we need to do to gain more acceptance, I guess, or a more positive idea of who we are.
Yeah, humanize it. I mean, I'm doing a speech now called The Mystery Letter. It'll release to YouTube later this year, that talks about how my best friend had come out as gay in the mid-1990s. Before then, I didn't know that I knew any gay people. We were in a hugely fundamentalist circle, and gays were the other. They were these angry, perverse malcontents trying to screw up the world. And, then when my best friend comes out, I'm like, whoa, hey, wait a minute, and it took me a little while to get over it and sort of get through my own prejudices. But I saw that he's just a beautiful man. He's awesome. He's my best friend. And seeing him as a human being first caused me to re-examine the bigotry in my own life and realize that he wasn't the problem, I was. Mm-hmm. And so, we've been friends for 30-some years. It's been awesome.
Well, here's a fun experiment to throw at somebody that is both Christian and homophobic. Of course, Seth, you know who Ray Boltz is.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember a song that he did? I want to say it came out in the early 90s. It was called Feel the Nails. Mm-hmm. Well, after he came out as being gay...
Was it Feel the Nails?
Yeah, does he still feel the nails every time?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I used to sing that one in church, so I do remember that song. But if you think about it as not just somebody who's constantly sinning, like how it was originally presented, but as him, as a gay man, fighting that struggle, knowing that he can't change but keep trying, that throws a whole new dimension on that song. And it just blew my mind when he came out. I was like, that's what that song meant. Holy cow.
When he came out, it was him, and it was what was her name? I mentioned her in the book. She was a popular Christian artist who came out as lesbian, and this happened after I had left Christian music, and I have no idea what CH or CCM has done with these artists, if they've been cast off.
Yeah, they've pretty well been cast off.
But it's an interesting thing to watch, to see people struggling, being people, even inside the Christian music industry. And I mentioned this in Deconverted as well, that the more you see behind the curtain, the more you see behind the airbrushes, you find that just people are people. You'll find amazing people and horrible people. You'll find people we had people that we did concerts with, and behind the scenes they're struggling with alcoholism. You got people sleeping with other artists behind impregnating other artists. You saw scandals. We saw one band member, we had him on the radio, and he was in prison for statutory rape the next year. I mean, you just find that warts and all, people are people, and Christian music Christian culture is not immune. They're struggling with the same stuff that everybody else struggles with.
Yeah, and it's that we're all human, but they try to put people up onto that pedestal, and it's an impossible standard to try to live to.
I think you'd probably be in conflict all the time.
Yeah,
You'd just be
definitely.
all the time tearing at yourself.
Now, speaking of books, you've got two actually out. The Deconverted, which was probably I think that I read that right before I read the Christopher Hitchens' God Is Not Great.
Geez, there's a step up.
And
yeah.
I found your book to be a lot more approachable.
I read Soap Opera Digest right before I read Hawthorne. because that's essentially what we're looking at. I mean, Hitchens' books are so amazingly well written and
you need a dictionary.
So academically, steeped in intelligence. And you've got me. I'm sort of the circus clown.
Well, I'll be honest, Seth. I actually enjoyed your book and found it a lot easier to read than I did the Hitchens book. I mean, I'm really
recording
enjoyed
this. I'm recording it and making it my ringtone. Seth Andrews chosen over Christopher Hitchens. I just want to know that. Thanks for the kind words. Well, the truth is that I always say it like this: where people looked up to Hitch. I mean, for me, he was one of the biggest players in my own deconversion. But people look up to people like the academics, the Dawkins and the Dennett and the Sam Harris. They look up to them, but they relate to me. I'm just the every guy. I'm the guy who doesn't have all the answers. I'm the guy who's just trying to figure it out. I'm the guy who's taken the journey along with you. And people have, for some reason, connected with me in that way. And so when they hear me on the radio and I'm like, I don't know, or I have a struggle, or I'm going through this, or I'm going through that, they in many ways relate. And we take that journey together. And so Deconverted was kind of that way. It's almost like putting your child on stage during the Christmas play when you release a work like that. You put it out there, and then you just say, please, everybody, tell me they're talented and pretty. Tell me that you enjoyed it, please. Just validate me.
Well, in that sense, I think in both of the books that I've read of yours, that one and Sacred Cows, both, they've been excellent books.
Well, thank you. Very kind.
And I do have links to where you can find both of those books, by the way, in the show notes. So if you're looking for them. Now, what was your inspiration for Sacred Cows?
Well, I had kind of a not so hidden agenda. I like that quote that I hear Dillahunty say all the time, that if you teach a child one religion, you indoctrinate them. If you teach them all religions, you inoculate them. And I think the same is true for adults in some cases, that if they were to really take a comparative religions class, or if they were to sort of look at this interpretive dance that these different belief traditions are doing, they would see the similarities, and they would maybe begin to, at least under the surface, start to connect the dots and realize, hey, wait a minute, we're just making this stuff up, or these are echoes of what everybody else is doing, and nothing is new under the sun. And so I thought, wouldn't it be something to put together a book that was fun to read, that had illustrations? And I brought on Vince DePorter, who is an illustrator who's drawn SpongeBob SquarePants, and he's drawn for Scooby-Doo and Batman and whatnot. And what if we did a deal where we just sort of bounced around different belief traditions and looked at some of the crazy stuff that people do in the name of belief across the planet? Mm-hmm. What if we made it fun to read, fun to look at, but at the end of the day, what we're saying is, the people in Scientology who are worshiping Xenu, the intergalactic overlord, who believe that we are an inner Thetan or Thetan, a soul that was brought here and exploded in hydrogen bombs and all this stuff. The people who mock Scientology, the Christians who mock Scientology, well, their beliefs aren't that much different. They believe in the soul, and they believe in a posthumous existence. And the people who freak out about magic crystals and these weird accoutrements of some of the more bizarre faiths, they still believe in anointing oil and chanting a gratitude to the sky over the chicken and the pasta. And what if we were to do a deal where we drew a circle around the fringe stuff, but then we linked it to the mainstream religions that really aren't any less insane? And so that's what that book did. And, religious people hate it. Most of the reviews are, he's just so angry. I'm going to pray for him,
I actually loved it, though.
It's not an angry book.
It's not. It's funny. I mean, I loved it.
It's it's got a barbed tongue, but it's said with, even in the introduction, I'm like, look, if there's a God, he's not worried about me. He's not threatened at all by my jabs. He's not going to flip out. Your faith isn't under any real danger if it's built on a solid foundation. Mm-hmm. And you know what? If we find some cracks in it, well, that's something we probably all would need to know. And so in a good faith sort of attitude, I started Sacred Cows and said, let's just go on a romp together and let's see what we can see. And at the end, I encourage the reader and the listener via the audiobook that, it's okay to break over the walls, climb over the walls, and go find freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that it encourages people to do that very thing. So.
Yeah, and talking about how people will talk about the woo and crystals being weird, but then turn around and have something else. I can remember that I was starting to get into this whole Wicca thing when I was in high school. I mean, because my best friend who was a girl was into Wicca, and I really had a crush on her, so I started getting into it too. But I was learning about all of these magic circles and stuff, and when people started getting sick in my own house, one thing that my stepmom, as the Pentecostal, did was she went out with a bottle of oil and actually drew a circle around the entire house in oil, and I was like, now you're just doing a magic circle here. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But in the same breath, she would tell you that magic and New Age stuff was all of the devil, but there she is doing the same thing in the name of God. And I was like,
and John Loftus has a great book called The Outsider Test for Faith, and it talks about how the people in a specific faith or belief tradition, faith is fine for them, but if another religion comes along, they want the evidence. So the Christian looks at Islam and says, we prove it. And they look at Mormonism and Scientology, prove it. The Eastern religions prove it. But faith, not being able to prove it, is that I embrace that for me. So what you do is you say, well, look, let's treat your religion with the same scrutiny that you are treating every other religion. Let's cast a critical eye upon it, and let's just see what happens. So.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest if that person's mom had gotten an e-meter instead, it might have worked a little bit better.
Yeah, you got to have about $5,000 to pay for one of those suckers, though. They are
that's
not
true.
cheap. Not cheap.
Oh, now you were just on the road in California, was it, that you just came home from this week, or?
Yeah. Sacramento, San Jose, San Luis Obispo, Riverside, and San Diego. We did 5 cities in 7 days.
I don't know how you do it. So, what's up next for you as far as touring?
Well, I'm doing a tour stop in Hot Springs, Arkansas. On the 8th of October, I'm actually going to do a lunch for the Freethought group in Little Rock midday, and then we're going to do an event in Hot Springs. Now, Arkansas they've got great Freethought groups in the middle of the Bible Belt, and so we're going to get together and do something there. I'm going to be at Great Lakes Reason Fest in Detroit on October the 29th. And then, of course, I have a huge 300th birthday podcast party as we celebrate podcast number 300. We're doing a live event in Dallas at the Doubletree by Hilton, Richardson, Dallas. Matt Dillahunty's doing a magic show. I've got Shelley Siegel coming in with her guitar. She's going to do some live music. I've got Sarah Hayter of Ex-Muslims of North America going to be there to speak. Dave Smalley of Dogma Debate, and Aaron Raw. He's got his new book coming out called The Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, and so he's going to be there. And we're going to do a live, in front of an audience kind of party. We got tickets that are only $15 for the whole freaking day, and we kept those prices low on purpose. And if anybody wants to go, I think we still have some left. You can go to, it's Fellowship of Freethought Dallas that's sponsoring it. So you just go to fofdallas.org/300live and get your tickets, and we'll see you there on the 19th of November.
All right, awesome. I was just trying to scratch that down right quick. Let's see.
Yeah, well, honestly, I've got an events page that I list all of my tour stops on everywhere, so you can just go to thethinkingatheist.com/events, and it's all listed right there.
Right, and I do have a link to the Thinking Atheist in the show notes as well, so people can just go into the show notes, click there, and they'll be able to find it. Now, you do a lot of conferences and touring. What's your favorite part of the tours? I mean, because I know that traveling itself has got to be really arduous. I mean, I was in the Navy, and I know I was just beat going everywhere.
Well, it's first of all, it gets me out of the studio. I spend most of my time in here making clicking keyframes and editing waveforms and doing graphics compositing and it's nice to get out of here and go connect with flesh and blood human beings who don't think I'm insane or going through a midlife crisis. It's really gratifying. I love giving an onstage presentation. One thing about being a storyteller, I think, in a movement that needs storytellers is I'm pretty good at being able to string together a presentation that doesn't just resonate with you as far as intellectually, which, I'm not Victor Stenger. You're not going to walk away going, that's the smartest man in the world. I'm not even remotely close. But what I want to do is I want to create a storytelling atmosphere that sort of starts with the brain, but also engages the heart and the gut and gets people to lean forward and be entertained and be moved by what's happening. And at the end, feel like they took a journey.